Discover the inspiring transformation. A cold CEO encounters a touching moment of hope in the rain. Michael Hawthorne, CEO of a tech empire, exuded power in his sleek office overlooking the Chicago skyline. To him, the gleaming buildings below represented the relentless pursuit of success, the American dream carved from ambition and numbers. Yet, on that rainy afternoon, as he rushed out of a high-stakes meeting, a moment paused his robotic stride. He barely noticed Grace Moore outside the convenience store, balancing groceries, and her son Liam's wheelchair, struggling against the downpour. He was too engulfed in a call, fixated on quarterly reports, his heart hardened by years of corporate loyalty. But fate knew better. Caught in an unexpected delay due to an accident up ahead, Michael turned to his right and spotted Grace from his car. She bent low, murmuring reassurances to Liam, her soaked clothes clinging to her frail frame. For a fleeting second, the sterile pressure of his executive world faded. The kindness of a passerby, sheltering Grace with an umbrella, struck a chord deep within him, an echo of humanity he had buried beneath layers of cold ambition. Could he really be missing out on something so essential? Days turned into weeks, and Michael's unyielding curiosity drew him back to that neglected neighborhood. Watching Grace navigate the chaos of life made his gut twist. She had 2 jobs, each draining her spirit, yet it was her unwavering kindness and fierce love for Liam that illuminated the darkness around them. Around her, neighbors struggled, their worries evident. Each visit cut deeper, forcing him to confront his own desolate existence. Was every success worth the emptiness that coiled in his gut each night? Michael's thoughts raced. Was it possible to emerge from the shadows of corporate gain into the vibrancy of genuine connection? Coffee shared with Grace at a worn diner brought small reprieves of warmth. Her stories of resilience gnawed at his ambition like silent raindrops on cold pavement. She expressed gratitude for simple joys, while he wrestled with the realization that he had sacrificed love for unyielding progress. A tug-of-war began. He yearned to make a change, to shatter the glass ceiling of greed that had kept him isolated, yet the whispers of his past echoed loud and clear. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Michael prepared to unveil his groundbreaking plan for community investment at the upcoming board meeting, the tension crawled under his skin. His heart raced. What if they rejected him? The sheer thought of going against the corporate machine he had spent 2 decades cultivating sent waves of doubt crashing over him. Could he afford to lose everything he had built for the sake of a child he barely knew? The phone rang. It was Grace, panic vibrating through her voice. Something had happened to Liam, and Michael felt his world tilt. Would he make the leap from detached CEO to someone with a soul, risking it all for a child whose heart beat with innocence? The weight of his decision loomed large. Time was running out, and all that was left was the aching uncertainty that gnawed at him, leaving his future hanging perilously in the balance. Michael's heart thudded against his ribcage as he gripped the phone, listening intently to Grace's breathless words. Each phrase she uttered drew him deeper into a reality he had long neglected. Her fear wrapped around him like a shroud, clutching at the vestiges of his carefully constructed defenses. As Grace described Liam's alarming symptoms, Michael's mind raced through a cascade of thoughts. How could a child's well-being become the pivot of his world when he had always been focused on quarterly profits? Yet, it was happening, and it scared him. The sterile sounds of his office, the hum of air conditioning, and the dull thrum of corporate chatter faded away. In their place, he heard Grace's voice painting a vivid mural of vulnerability and desperation. Images of Liam, bright-eyed yet stricken by circumstances beyond his control, flooded his mind. Where had he been all this time? Caught in the hamster wheel of relentless ambition, he had missed the life outside his glass walls that needed saving more than any spreadsheet needed updating. Before he knew it, Michael was driving through unfamiliar streets, his focus honed tight on the single destination ahead: Grace's home. Each bump in the road felt as though he were lurching toward a personal reckoning. The lanterns of the dimly lit neighborhood cast long shadows of uncertainty over his thoughts. What if he failed to help? What if he arrived too late? The questions were relentless, mirroring the shaking in his hands. Upon arriving, he stepped into a world starkly different from his own. The walls of Grace's home exuded warmth and chaos, a contrast to the sterile precision of his office. The air was heavy with an urgency that drove him forward, pushing him to follow the echoes of Grace's distress. He found her in the living room, her eyes wide with fear, cradling her son who lay listless on the couch. Something snapped inside Michael, the familiar instincts of a leader kicked into gear. He assessed the scene quickly. He wasn't a doctor, but years of boardroom decisions had honed his ability to analyze and act. The moment demanded clarity he thought only belonged in business. He stepped forward, his heart surging with newfound purpose. As Grace explained what little they had managed before reaching out for help, Michael's resolve solidified. Not only would he support them in whatever way he could in this immediate crisis, but he also began to forge a plan. He visualized utilizing his resources, providing access to better healthcare, mobilizing support, and advocating for systemic change that could protect families like Grace's from the brink of disaster. The pathways of his mind began to unspool. Instead of walling off the world with corporate ambitions, he could carve a space for compassion. In the next few hours, a new vision crystallized within him, a foundation, a movement, not a boardroom agenda or sterile proposal, but something rooted in human experience, born from a child's struggle. That fusion of personal care and professional prowess sparked a light he had long dimmed. But as he pressed forward, threading on a narrative of change, palpable doubts wound their way back into his consciousness. Unexpected roadblocks loomed ahead. Would his company embrace this shift, or would the executives cling to profit margins like a safety net? Could he maintain his status while striking a stark balance between his new objectives and corporate expectations? As the night deepened and weighed on him, Michael's phone pinged a message from his assistant, a calendar reminder. The board meeting was in less than 24 hours. The gravity of his decision loomed heavily, casting shadows over both his heart and ambitions. The time had come to face the truth of who he was and who he wanted to be. Would he rise to challenge the very foundation of his life's work, or cave under the pressures of expectation once more? The moment of truth arrived, yet before he could allow himself to dwell within the uncertainty, another notification chimed unexpectedly. This time, it was Grace, with tremors still echoing in her voice. "Michael, there is something you need to know." Michael felt his pulse quicken as he opened the message. What could Grace possibly reveal now? The thought nagged at him, a compulsion to protect against any further emotional upheaval creeping into the already charged atmosphere of the moment. He inhaled deeply, reminding himself that this was about more than just numbers or corporate stability. This was about Liam's life. "Michael," Grace's voice trembled as she continued. "There is something in Liam's test results, something the doctors are saying we need to act on quickly. They think it could be serious." The weight of her words sunk into him, the gravity forcing him to reflect not only on the impending crisis threatening Liam but on his own impending confrontation with the board. Determination surged through him. He wasn't equipped with the medical knowledge to solve Liam's problems directly, but he was a strategist, a planner. They couldn't just wait for conventional solutions. Suddenly the urgency felt like a call to arms rather than a burden. If he could devise a way to leverage his business acumen, perhaps he could bring a change that extended beyond this singular moment. That night, as he sat alone in his car in a dimly lit parking lot, Michael sketched out a plan on a notepad, illuminated only by the light from his phone. His hands moved quickly, the pen gliding over the paper. He wrote down potential partnerships with hospitals, initiatives for funding innovative treatments, and ways to generate awareness about childhood health issues. The fire inside him roared. This wasn't just about profits anymore, it was about creating a ripple of hope. The words took shape on the page, but so did the fear nagging at his consciousness. Would the board understand? Would they support him, or would their indifference drown out his aspirations? His mind flickered between assurance and doubt, between the solid foundation he had built in the corporate world and the precarious venture he now considered. With each item on the list, he visualized how each element tied back to Liam's story, connecting a child's moment of vulnerability to the larger structural realities he had long ignored. The thought itself was galvanizing. The realization that he could wield his corporate influence as a tool for advocacy ignited something deep within him. Yet, he couldn't ignore that mounting pressure. The clock was ticking down to that board meeting, and to prepare for it meant balancing his newly emerged ideals with the cold realities of office politics. Would he find allies, or just opponents among the corporate sharks who had been conditioned to see a world measured only in charts and bottom lines? The road ahead was unworn and fraught with challenges, yet Michael felt a shift, a profound transformation beginning to take shape not only in his intentions but within himself. He had spent so long in the shadows of his own ambition. Now, he was stepping into the light, even if it meant confronting the opposition of his peers. As dawn broke on the horizon, illuminating the path ahead, a new notification vibrated on his phone, a reminder that it was time to face his fears. Board meeting in 1 hour. The familiar tone sounded like a warning bell, one that would signal whether he would maintain his sterile existence or fight for a cause that ignited his soul. What awaited him could change everything, for himself and for others. The fate of his professional identity was entwined with the fate of others, and as he gathered his things to head into the meeting, a final thought pierced through the tension. He had to stay true to what had awakened in him. The time had come to commit. Would he embrace this new identity, or would he retreat back to the line of least resistance? The answer waited at the conference room door. Michael stepped into the conference room, a swell of anxiety rising in his chest as he faced the polished board members, each one an embodiment of the relentless pursuit of profit. Their expressions were a mix of indifference and curiosity, and for a moment, he felt himself shrink against the imposing glass walls. As he settled into his seat, he organized the papers before him, his handwritten notes covered in sprawling ink that spoke of innovation and possibility. The agenda loomed before him, a stark reminder of his dual purpose today: reassert the company's strategies while seeking to sway his peers towards something that felt so personal. Still battling that internal division, he clenched his jaw and forced himself to breathe deeply. "Good morning," the CEO began, his voice echoing in the sterile environment. "Let us discuss our upcoming investments and projections." The words washed over Michael, blending into the hum of corporate tactics that had once felt second nature but now seemed starkly hollow. As various department heads presented their metrics, outlining advances and stock potential, Michael's mind drifted back to Liam. The contrast between the sterile data and the life of a child hanging in the balance weighed heavily on him. Each polished argument for profit made him feel more resolute. He had to find a way to inject humanity into this calculating atmosphere. When the floor turned to him, he felt a sudden surge of adrenaline. "Before we discuss numbers," he began, his voice firm but tinged with an urgency that surprised him, "I'd like to propose a new initiative, one that relates to public health." He cleared his throat, glancing at the skeptical expressions before him. "We can't just vote on quarterly numbers without considering the kind of world we want to create through our business." The board members exchanged glances, uncertainty etched across their faces. An older member leaned in, a hint of disdain reflected in his posture. "Are you suggesting we pivot from our focus?" he asked bluntly, eyebrows raised in challenge. Michael stood firm, bolstered by the image of Liam. "What if we could establish partnerships with local hospitals? Fund research that could lead to groundbreaking treatments for childhood illnesses? Consider the impact on both the market and communities. Imagine our brand leading the charge in health advocacy." He felt ignited, the passion spilling from him like a fire igniting dry brush. The room fell into an unsettling silence as the weight of his words sank in. Leaders conditioned to value fiscal propriety over compassion were now confronted with the unexpected idea of moral investment. "We need a fresh narrative," he continued, "one that ties our successes to real-world outcomes. What if we become known not just for profits, but for being a force for good in healthcare?" Some members shifted in their chairs, uncertainty etched on their faces, others visibly recoiled. The CEO's face remained a mask of neutrality. "It's risky," he replied slowly, his gaze steady, "and outside our core mission." Michael's heart raced. Was this the moment where ambition clashed with morality? He realized the deeper battle was not just about corporate doctrine, it was about redefining success entirely. With each breath, He could feel the room's tension alter, small flickers of doubt beginning to emerge in the unwavering corporate facade. The real risk, Michael countered, is standing still while children like Liam suffer. We must confront what adds true value, not just financial, but as human beings. As Michael stated his case, he felt something shift within. He was no longer an outsider trying to fit into a corporate mold, but a pioneering force, his vision anchored in purpose. This was no longer just about Liam, it was about changing himself in the process. But just as he began to feel the tide turning, a voice sliced through the atmosphere, challenging his newfound resolve. Michael, if you want to change the direction of this company, you need real numbers, real data to support your claims. How can you prove this? Isn't just idealism? With that probing question, the stakes escalated. Now, he needed to find a way to ground his inspiration in hard data while maintaining his courage. The moment of truth was fraying around the edges. Could he seamlessly weave passion with pragmatism? The answer hinged on a plan he had yet to even formulate. The door was propped open for a potential shift, but would he step through it or retreat into the familiar shadows? Michael stared into the faces of the board, their skepticism settling like a dense fog in the room. He had poured himself into that 3-minute speech, turning vulnerable passion into ideas that could lead to something larger than himself. Was the fire rushing through his veins as pure as it felt, or was it just the last flicker of hope against the harsh machinery of corporate conformity? He fished through his notes, the ink smudged, words barely legible as uncertainty began to wash over him. But the question rattling in his mind was a cold reminder of the chasm he faced. Data. Cold, hard numbers stood between him and the vision he longed to present. Damn it, he muttered under his breath, frustration mounting anew. What are you planning, Michael? He heard someone ask, voices blending with the ambient noise of rising tension. Ignoring the question briefly, he envisioned a different kind of outcome, Liam smiling, healthy, and joyful. Success didn't always mean statistics, but proving value in a place that had lived on metrics for so long wouldn't come without rational backing. It nagged at him. I need to open up new channels, collaborate, he thought. He could pioneer partnerships with researchers, engage in community dialogues, turn abstract compassion into quantifiable goals. This was no longer just about a single child but could be framed on a large scale, a public health initiative that transformed not only the organization but the whole industry. He took another deep breath, grounding himself in the chaos of pressing thoughts. I will find the data. I will find the stories. I will prove my ideas are not just idealistic. Resolutely, he knew he had to harness his professional talents to build a compelling argument, one that combined the emotional with the empirical. His gaze settled on the CEO, whose steely demeanor remained unmoved. I'll need your support for research investment, Michael declared, his voice steady, newly bolstered by clarity. We could partner with data analytics firms, work alongside health advocates. The outcome can be measured and reported, proving not only potential profit but also our commitment to social responsibility. Murmurs swept across the table, skepticism blending with intrigue. Yet, Michael felt a stirring sense of optimism, an emergence of internal strength. It was a tinge of power. He had ideas now rooted in actionable plans, leading to a vision he was willing to fight for. With renewed purpose, he leaned forward, bracing himself for what he must do next. Imagine the metrics. Reduced hospitalizations, improved outreach, positive press coverage that speaks to the heart, an entire narrative shift that could redefine not just this company, but our legacy. For the first time, silence reigned as the board considered his words, faces shifting from skepticism to curiosity. And while one voice sought statistics, glimpses of agreement flickered across the room, the faintest signs of a breakthrough. But just as Michael began to feel the swell of progress, another voice filled the silence. The senior member, with disdain on his face, leaned forward again. And if it fails? What happens to the finances then, Michael? Our shareholders won't accept vague promises. The tension folded back in, heavier than before. Michael understood that one concern stunted his forward momentum, the need for acceptance from traditionalists who thrived on well-established corporate shadows. He felt the pressure close in around him, and with it, a gnawing fear. Would his ambition become a liability? Could he hold on to this burgeoning vision while confronting the ancient walls holding his company hostage? In that moment, he realized his next move was crucial. It would shape the future not only of the company but of his own purpose within it. Determined, Michael resolved to gather the data and present a robust plan, but deep down, he knew he would face fierce opposition. With competition closing in and the stakes escalating, the time had come for Michael to face not just the board but the darkness within himself. Would he falter under their scrutiny or become the catalyst for change he now craved? As he formulated his next steps, anticipation crackled in the air. A definitive collision was on the horizon, waiting for him to confront both the corporate climate and the self-doubt threatening to consume him. Michael left the boardroom with a storm of conflicting emotions swirling inside him. The weight of the room still pressed against his chest, yet a flicker of determination sparked within. It was evident that support from the board wasn't guaranteed, and each step forward felt like traversing quicksand. The looming question, could he truly navigate the nuances of corporate tradition and incite change, haunted him. He found himself back at his desk, staring at the array of notes and materials scattered before him. The stark reality of numbers and metrics held a powerful sway, shaping how decisions were made. I need to immerse myself in the data, he mused, the thought almost whispering a promise of clarity amidst the chaos. That evening, he began to gather information and metrics from various public health resources. Michael became absorbed in reports detailing successful health initiatives, studies showcasing improved patient outcomes through community engagement, and the proliferation of innovative health apps that offered measurable benefits. Hours slipped away, but with every page he turned, he found himself invigorated. A newfound sense of purpose ignited inside him. The data didn't merely fill pages, it told stories of hope, resilience, of lives transformed through thoughtful action and commitment. If I can weave these stories with my vision, he thought, I will forge a compelling case that cannot be ignored. The potential to shift perspectives grew clearer. Less about financial gains, and more about fundamental human connection. A turning point came as he stumbled upon a case study that examined comprehensive health outreach with real-life testimonials. These narratives, grounded in humility and the essence of humanity, provided not just dry statistics but emotional resonance that could spark empathy, a stark contrast to the board's cold detachment. Driven by this revelation, he switched into a new gear. I will bring this home, he declared to himself. The transformation was evident, the task at hand began to feel less daunting, morphing into a mission that was imbued with personal significance. It was no longer about just defending an idea, it was about proving the humanity behind it, the potential to touch lives while pushing the company into a new age. The following days became a whirlwind of activity. He reached out to colleagues across departments for their insights and support. Conversations with data analysts revealed the extent of the company's resources. Insights from marketing opened his eyes to how to frame his proposal. Each interaction chipped away at the walls of doubt. He gained confidence and an unexpected ally in Angela from the marketing department, who believed in the potential to shift the narrative. Then came the moment that would test his resolve. An impromptu meeting was scheduled with the board members to discuss upcoming projects. It's now or never, he thought, adrenaline surging through him as he prepared his pitch. He outlined plans not only based on projected numbers but encapsulated around human experiences, tangible goals interlaced with the emotional narratives they could embrace. But just as he began to feel the tide turning in his favor, an ominous thought settled in. What if they reject this again? What if they are not swayed by compassion? Even amidst excitement, the specter of failure loomed large. The questions scrutinized his newfound confidence, threatening to plunge him back into the depths of despair. As he stood outside the boardroom, heart racing, he recognized the gravity of the moment. He could either conform to their constraints or defy the odds with his bold, heartfelt approach. The door swung open, and he realized there was far more at stake than just numbers on a page. He stepped through prepared to confront the rigid expectations with the human stories that demanded to be told. And so, with a final deep breath, Michael readied his heart and mind for what lay ahead, knowing that whatever the outcome, the true challenge remained. Would he find a way to merge passion with propriety, or would the weight of tradition crush the stirring light of change he had fought so hard to nourish? Michael stepped into the boardroom, instantly smothered by a familiar weight. The polished oak table gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, and the straightforward faces of the board members melted into blurred figures in his peripheral vision. He forced himself to focus, recentering his thoughts on the plan, a meticulous blend of statistics, emotional testimonies, and human connection. He clutched his notes tightly, feeling the ink beneath his fingertips anchor him in the present moment. As he began to speak, he could hear the tremor in his voice. Today, I want to discuss more than just fiscal growth. I want to share a vision that stands at the intersection of profitability and humanity. The words tasted different in his mouth, richer and more significant than the usual corporate jargon. Every word was a step toward bridging the cavernous divide between cold metrics and warm connections. Yet, he was met with stone-faced silence. The board members leaned back in their chairs, their eyes narrowed slightly, skeptical. His stomach knotted as he watched them process his call to action, the expectation of dismissal hovering like storm clouds. He forged on, recounting personal stories his research had unearthed: the young mother whose life improved with mobile health services, the elderly gentleman who found a community through outreach programs. These were tales of resilience, of tangible transformation, counterpoints to the mere bottom line they were accustomed to seeing. But as he reached a pivotal moment, one that would either crescendo into acceptance or crumble into rejection, a familiar figure interrupted him. James, a senior member of the board whose reputation for mockery was as vast as his knowledge of the industry, leaned forward, a cynical smile dancing on his lips. "You're selling us sentimentalism instead of strategy, Michael. Why should we care about anecdotes when we can quantify actual outcomes? Sounds more like charity work than corporate initiative." The jab felt like a punch to the gut. Doubt gnawed at the edges of his confidence. Could he salvage this presentation? With each word James uttered, Michael's pulse quickened, clawing at his composure. But then he remembered the urgency of the stories. This was not just about the numbers. It was a commitment to genuine change. Taking a breath, Michael recalibrated. "I understand the value of measurable outcomes," he countered, his voice steadier. "But isn't it also our duty to inspire change beyond mere spreadsheets? How can we create a sustainable impact unless we ignite compassion within our strategies?" The air crackled with potential as he raised his tone, tapping into the very essence of his vision. He felt a subtle shift in the room, a flicker of curiosity from some members of the board. Angela, sitting at the other end, nodded slightly, fueling a sense of solidarity. Her warm smile, a beacon of hope amidst the criticisms, lent wings to his resolve. He pressed further, intertwining more stories with the data, painting a vivid picture of their potential to lead in a new area of corporate responsibility. Michael completed his presentation and stood, heart pounding, awaiting judgment. The silence stretched painfully, filled with hesitations that cracked like ice beneath the weight of their deliberation. Each second felt like an eternity as his mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Would they see the humanity he presented, or would they remain shackled by tradition? Suddenly, the chairman cleared his throat. "Michael, while your passion is commendable, the data you provided is compelling, but we need to understand the financial implications further. What are the projected costs and outcomes?" And just like that, the board had shifted. They were asking for more. A wave of resilience surged within him. He needed to embrace this moment. Prompted by a combination of fear and determination, he began to gather deeper insights into fiscal sustainability, vowing to equip himself with the necessary numbers while not losing sight of the narratives that grounded his mission. But this new task demanded more than research. It called for an entirely different level of investment in himself to evolve from a mere presenter to a strategist who could weave together numbers and heart. Thinking of his colleagues, he made an internal pact: he would dig deeper, adopting a strategic mindset that balanced heart and data. The clock ticked loud in his ears as he realized he was not only facing the board but the internal limits he had placed upon himself. The time had come to face, he thought, the concluding thoughts echoing for clarity. What awaited beyond the boardroom doors as he prepared to prepare even more emphatically was a personal journey unlike any he'd embarked on before, where numbers met storytelling, and conviction transformed into mission. As he stepped into the corridor, calculations and empathetic narratives battling in his mind, one thought surged forward: what new path would he need to carve out for himself to encompass both the heart and the numbers? The question loomed large, just as the promise of transformation beckoned. As Michael walked through the corridor, a sense of urgency took hold. His shoulders felt heavier with the weight of his own expectations, pushing him toward a metamorphosis he hadn't fully anticipated. He needed clarity and equilibrium between the analytical precision he had always relied upon and the newfound recognition of his emotional intelligence. It felt as though he was standing at the precipice of a vast canyon, contemplating the leap into uncharted territory. Sitting at his familiar desk, he gazed out the window, watching the streets below bustling with life. There was urgency out there too, a commingling of ambitions, struggles, and dreams. Michael pressed his fingers against the cool surface of the glass, a reminder of the world just beyond his reach. He needed to deepen his understanding, not just of the numerical data he previously prioritized, but of the human elements that created metrics in the first place. Compelled to analyze his own methodology, Michael opened up his laptop. The familiar glow of the screen illuminated his resolve, and he made a plan. He would begin by staying late at the office, diving into market research, and uncovering the socio-economic factors influencing potential outcomes. But this time, it wasn't just about the spreadsheets. He wrote down questions in a notebook. What stories could the numbers tell? How could he illustrate the emotional weight behind the data? His enthusiasm plummeted when he confronted a thought that clawed at his confidence. What if he didn't have the capability to fuse compassion with strategy? He couldn't allow these doubts to derail his ambition. There was a steely resolve building within him, a determination to become adept in this new approach. He began searching for mentorship beyond his usual circles, reaching out to those with a proven track record in blending financial acuity and social consciousness. As conversations unfolded over the following weeks, he realized there were skills he hadn't fully embraced. Listening became an art, a bridge to understanding perspectives he had overlooked. Sharing lived experiences, encouraging dialogue that encompassed vulnerabilities, it all began to feel like vital components of a cohesive strategy. Michael hosted informal roundtable discussions with his colleagues. He encouraged them to share their thoughts on balancing profitability and purpose. To his surprise, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Ideas blossomed, and suddenly he was fielding creative concepts from those he presumed were solely focused on numbers. It became increasingly clear that his transformation was not just personal, it was catalyzing a shift within his team as well. Yet, as he embraced this journey, every step forward was shadowed by a deeper realization. The cold metrics he had once clutched so tightly were now intertwined with narratives that stirred emotions and spurred change. This was the calling he didn't know he had. He was not just crafting strategies, he was shaping a movement. Late one evening, consumed by his newfound energy, Michael decided to attend a local community meeting. He wanted to observe firsthand those whose stories he had referenced in the boardroom. Arriving at the venue, he felt a flutter of apprehension. He had woven their narratives, but witnessing their lives in reality was an entirely different challenge. As the night unfolded, a single mother stood to share how local resources had transformed her life and her children's future. The raw honesty in her voice resonated deep within him, and he could almost hear the echo of his previous skepticism in James's remarks. The feedback, the outcomes, the metrics, they felt simultaneously trivial and crucial in that context. By the end of the meeting, Michael deliberated over the visceral connection he felt. He realized the struggle for balance between empathy and analytics was not merely a strategy, it was a calling for authenticity he must commit to holding within himself. As he abandoned the venue, the gravity of his decisions weighed heavily on him. He understood. Now that growth required risking discomfort, facing challenges that felt insurmountable. How far would he be willing to go to integrate this perspective into the corporate strategy and transform his own career path? The question surged within him, pulling at the threads of his ambition. What sacrifices would he need to make to ensure this vision became reality, while still fighting to maintain respect among board members who believed in cold calculations over warm narratives? The desire for validation mingled distressingly with the imperative to innovate. He left the meeting more resolute yet contemplative, knowing challenges awaited. In seeking change, he must confront not just external obstacles but the internal confrontations that lay ahead. The poignant moments he witnessed promised a different approach to power dynamics, yet Michael could not shake the disquieting question lingering over his newfound purpose. What tangible steps would he take next to solidify this balance within his professional reality? Michael woke the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose that sparked a fire within him. He found himself lingering over coffee, a vessel that had become a ritual of contemplation. As he sipped, thoughts raced through his mind how to distill the powerful emotions he had witnessed into actionable strategies that could resonate with his team. But just as inspiration struck, the specter of doubt loomed. Would they even listen? He spent countless hours huddled over numbers, immersed in an analytical fortress, building a reputation predicated on cold logic. Now, everything felt precarious. Instead of avoiding discomfort, he had to learn to embrace it. He grabbed his notebook, flipping to the questions he had scribbled down weeks ago. They swirled in his mind, taunting him to discover their meaning. Why had those stories affected him so deeply? What did they reveal about the potential for change within his organization? The office buzzed with the usual morning routine when he arrived. He took a moment to absorb the familiar sounds, the click of keyboards, the rustling of paper before settling at his desk. He would lead with vulnerability, drawing upon the emotional reservoir he felt during the community meeting. Would his colleagues appreciate this new direction or resist it as they had in the past? He decided to call a team meeting that afternoon, more intimate than the roundtable discussions. It was time to confront the fear of sharing his journey toward emotional intelligence directly, to let them witness his transformation as it unfolded. By opting to be phased in uncertainty himself, he hoped the authenticity would reverberate with them. With each passing hour, anticipation mounted, beating in time with his racing heart. He rehearsed his speech mentally while going over reports and data, ensuring he wouldn't stray too far from the hard facts. Yet the balance he sought seemed elusive. How could he tether numbers and emotions without compromising his credibility? Finally, the time arrived. Walking into the conference room, a wave of nerves washed over him. He cast his gaze over his colleagues, faces of curiosity, skepticism, and indifference. Michael inhaled deeply, allowing the weight of their expectations to crystallize into a form of empowerment. He began with an anecdote from the community meeting, describing the single mother whose resilience challenged his preconceived notions of success. As he spoke, he noticed the subtle shifts in their expressions. Heads nodded, eyes widened with interest, and murmurs of agreement began to ripple through the group. The convergence of data and narrative fostered engagement, framing the hard numbers with a human context they hadn't considered before. Imagine, he elaborated, if we could structure our strategies around these stories. If we could measure impact not just in revenue but in the real lives we touch. What if our bottom line could reflect something deeper? His voice steadied as he began to see the potential impact of his words. By appealing to their innate desire for purpose alongside profit, he forged a new allegiance with the team. Ideas erupted in real time. They didn't just talk about improving profitability, but how to be the catalysts for change within their market. It felt electric, exhilarating, and frightening all at once. Yet after the meeting, as accolades poured in from his colleagues, Michael wrestled with conflicting sentiments. It was a moment of victory, true, but how would the upper management respond to this shift? Would they embrace a narrative-focused approach or condemn it as frivolous sentimentality? Returning to his desk, nerves prickled at the back of his mind. Questions resurfaced. Was this authentic transformation a path towards his ultimate vision or merely a distraction from the hard metrics that dictated success? The juxtaposition of corporate ambition against personal authenticity gnawed at him. As he stared out the window again, he wondered how many more leaps he could afford to take before he found solid ground. The next board meeting loomed close, a critical juncture that could either validate his newfound approach or plunge him back into the harsh realities of corporate politics. Michael had steered uncharted waters, but a new confrontation awaited him, the courage to advocate for change amidst a culture that revered indifference. Would he forge a new alliance with his own morals, or would the analytics hold him hostage once more? The pivotal moment was nigh, and he felt the stakes rising. Michael entered the boardroom, feeling the weight of expectation from the seasoned board members seated around the sleek oak table. Each face was a familiar part of his journey, some skeptical, others curious, and a few somewhat supportive. Today was not just another meeting, this was a culmination of his months of introspection, evolution, and a determination to reshape the narrative of the company he had once viewed solely through a lens of fiscal gain. He took a breath, feeling the rush of adrenaline coursing through him. Thank you all for being here, he began, his voice steady, imbued with the conviction he had worked hard to cultivate. Today, I want to discuss the transformative initiative I proposed last month, but I want to ground it in both heart and hard data. As murmurs rippled through the board, he unveiled the dual framework of his vision. He presented analytics juxtaposed with heartfelt stories from the community. The raw numbers showed the potential for increased market share and profit margins as they pivoted toward corporate social responsibility, but he juxtaposed it with profound personal testimony stories of children impacted by health initiatives and families finding hope through community outreach. You see, Michael explained, intensifying his focus, success doesn't have to be measured solely in profits. When our corporate identity aligns with a purpose beyond profit, we create measurable impacts, tangible improvements that influence real lives. Just think about what these stories represent, a transformation rooted not just in financial growth but in community empowerment. He noticed one of the board members, Angela, nodding in agreement. Her support ignited a renewed fire within him. He elaborated on his previous visit to the community meeting, detailing the emotional revelations he had experienced and how that had fueled his desire to blend compassion with corporate responsibility. As he proceeded, he felt a palpable shift in energy. Instead of facing a wall of indifference, he was greeted by contemplative expressions. Mirroring the confidence he had developed through introspection, he pressed onward, supplying projections on anticipated positive media exposure and its resulting brand loyalty. When we embrace this initiative, we become part of something greater than ourselves. We not only cultivate goodwill, but we solidify our standing as industry leaders dedicated to meaningful impact. The room remained quiet, but an underlying tension suggested that minds were reshaping perceptions. Just as he believed the tide was turning, James took his predictable stance. That's all well and good, Michael, but can you guarantee that shifting our focus won't backfire? We've built this organization on metrics. Success without quantifiable outcomes is inherently risky. Michael steeled himself. I appreciate the concern, James. But risk is inherent in any ambition worth pursuing. By establishing a point of accountability, we can ensure we are measurable in our commitment to social impact. We will gather data, assess outcomes, and adjust as necessary, just as we have done with previous initiatives. After a moment of silence, the chairman interjected, if we bend our focus to compassion, how do we convey this shift to our shareholders? Their trust is paramount, and they operate under a singular expectation: return on investment. The flicker of challenge in their eyes drove Michael to lean into the confrontation, fueled by a sense of realization that he had not felt before. What if, he posited, we could show them that engaged communities yield enduring loyalty, drawing in new customers who align with our values? Onboarding social responsibility could represent a pivotal marketing narrative. He glanced around the room, gauging reactions. I propose we devise a pilot program, one that measures both financial growth and social footprints. We can assess both community health improvements and shifts in customer behaviors while maintaining profitability. A low buzz erupted in the room, the kind of buzz signifying contemplation rather than dismissal. He seized the moment, pressing forward. Let us lead the industry, let us be more than just a company, let us redefine success itself to include the well-being of our communities. As Michael continued to articulate his vision with clarity, he began to witness the transformative power of vulnerability, the courage to integrate professional ambitions with heartfelt aspirations. The tension that had once felt suffocating now pulsed with possibility. Finally, the chairman broke the silence with a thoughtful expression. If we are to proceed, we will need a comprehensive framework supporting both strategy and storytelling. Can you commit to providing that level of detail? The weight of validation washed over him, solidifying the groundwork he had sought. Absolutely. I will gather my team and mobilize resources to outline a robust plan, tapping into both our analytical prowess and the stories that foster connection. As the meeting concluded, the members stood, and Michael felt a rush of acknowledgement. He had not only presented a proposal, he had demonstrated that his shift in perspective was not just professional, it was personal. He was now the embodiment of the change he wished to advocate, and the recognition twinkling in the eyes of his colleagues signaled their potential embrace of this new journey. Walking out of the boardroom, confidence surged through him, a stark contrast to the uncertainty he had felt before. He had carved out a space where compassion met corporate success, and in doing so, had etched his own identity into the evolving narrative, blending professionalism with heart. As he stepped into the sunlight pouring through the office windows, Michael reveled in the sense of achievement fueled by purpose. This wasn't just about the company. It represented the dawn of a new ethos in professional ambition, an emblematic embodiment of authentic connection driving impactful change. The transformative journey he embarked upon made him realize that true success is a multidimensional measure, a tapestry of growth, resilience, and purpose that he could now share with the world. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment their reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion.